Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Enterprise Dish, where it is a magical day, and I didn't even tell Rick I was going to do this, but he is a newly minted Microsoft MVP. Is that correct?
Oh, wow. Yeah, indeed. 1st of September. A lot of work has paid off, and I've been blogging a lot on Azure, and I secured some extra opportunities outside of the Veeam gig here. Been working on that for quite a while, so thank you. Yeah, and actually now the hard part begins. I have to
Mm-hmm.
actually keep it.
You make a bunch of
So
promises, you do a bunch of work, and then now you got to maintain that momentum.
yeah, and it's interesting because there's this phrase or phenomena, what I would call a dual MVP. Sometimes people have MVP status from two different areas. Good example might be Office 365 apps and services and say Azure, or maybe over into like SQL Server world and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But I started in what they called cloud and data center management, which was aligned to Hyper-V. And times have changed. I moved a little bit of my practice around. I actually still use Hyper-V every day in the lab, but I'm not able to evangelize it as much. But I'm doing a lot with Azure nowadays, so it's actually a new award category. So that'll be an interesting one to go through. And yeah, I just got to keep it. That's the hard part.
That it is. But doing the podcast is hopefully the easy part, or maybe more relaxing, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's here we are yet again, the boys from although we have this is like a beautiful day. The low today is 57, the high is upper 70s. Like you get that nice span of should I have the furnace on, should I have the AC on, but it's
Windows, yeah. Windows open.
yep.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. I do not want to be in here, that's for sure. That's why
Well,
we're doing this early.
yeah. So happening this week, although this podcast will go live on Monday more than likely. So if you're listening to this on any day, it went live Monday. Microsoft held this little thing, Rick, called Ignite, which usually is my favorite event of the year. But unfortunately, because of not being able to go outside and play with our friends, they had to do it digitally, and they streamed it for like around the clock, which was kind of nuts. So it was just like 24 or 48 hours of like continuous conversations around various sessions. Anything that jumped out to you? I got a couple highlights we'll dig through, but as a newly minted MVP, what did you think of Ignite?
Well, it was a lot to take in, but I went in very scrutinous, or at least observant, maybe is a better word, on the mechanics of this virtual event. I had two opportunities to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these were as me as a sponsor,
Okay.
as Veeam. One is I did a quick little video, which was on the main feed.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is I did one of the tabletop talks, hard to say, around using Azure for data protection. So the first thing I'll say is that is giganormous a word? Or
It can be.
Okay. So I was giganormously impressed
Wow.
with the main feed. So if you went to ignite.microsoft.com and for 48 hours sharp,
Mm-hmm.
constant, there was a live stream of high-end production quality in studio. I mean, it almost felt like you're watching, okay, this isn't makes it, it's almost undersells it, but it almost felt like you're watching, TV,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of this was a studio, this is live, this is a broadcast, like think of ESPN,
Yeah.
or something like that. I was completely blown away by that. And then, of course, you could go sideways, break out, and break out. I thought I look very specifically at like I said, the production quality.
Mm-hmm.
Blown away. The digital experience was really good. Now, to be fair, they've got Azure as an infrastructure behind it to help,
That little thing.
be a content delivery network. But I was very, very impressed with it. I actually enjoyed the ability to, I don't want to call it a 48-hour keynote, because every time you go to a major event,
Mm-hmm.
everybody says the keynotes are too long, right? But this one set the bar. But it really gave you a complete varietal tour of all initiatives Microsoft. And it also did probably the best job I've ever seen of incorporating customer stories. The amount of customer stories that were brought in there was
Yeah.
incredible. Now, I say that not lightly, because in my role here, I have to work hard to bring that in too. And to get somebody to go through all their company approvals, to go up on stage, to admit whatever, or at least video, that is some work. So I am really blown away just by the production quality of it. And I think it also completely democratized the way that people can consume these IT events.
Mm-hmm.
I look at traditional industry events, and I think you and I have talked about this before, right? When we were at VeeamON, we're like, people usually get 1 or 2 event training type of things a year. You got like one shot for that travel budget, your time allocation, whatever. Now that these events are generally free, virtual, they can really consume it a lot of different ways. And I don't know what the final attendance was, but they were telling us a number as a sponsor that just blew my mind away at what they were expecting. So completely impressed and completely enjoyed the amounts of different ways that attendees could participate. I'll give one shout out. I really liked Rick Kloss's kind of hosting, Rickster CDN on Twitter. Dropping in Canadian bacon references and all.
Wearing the hat.
Yeah, the Hatter. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's Rick. So, nice individual. So I enjoyed his particular bit, and I had serious envy of Brad Anderson's kitchen. But other than that, it was an outstanding event.
Brad Anderson does, for those who aren't familiar, is he the executive corporate vice president? But he leads Microsoft 365. He the
365 BU, and then Rickster is the team of Azure advocates. So those are kind of the 2 areas I bounce in the most myself.
Yeah, I always see, if I would have been down there, every Ignite, since I've been going to Ignite, I think I've talked to Brad. And, he's a very wholesome individual and just a very nice person to talk to. But he's climbed the ladder, and he has a thing called the Ship Room. He does some like backyard talks, and they're all extremely well produced. And he does a very good job of educating from the Microsoft perspective, keep that in mind, of what is going on in his universe. And if you haven't seen some of his videos, they're worth checking out. They really are.
Yeah, and he's also, Microsoft's really good about having individuals who have been with the company for a very long time. That is actually something near and dear to my heart. You don't see that often anymore. This year will be 10 years at Veeam for me. I got lifer in my DNA, right?
Yeah.
But Brad actually did some hard pivots, because a couple years ago, 365 wasn't a business unit.
Right.
He used to lead what was like where System Center used to sit, right? So it's also really admirable to see a long-term resource make real big pivots and go to the kind of the new strategic stuff. I think that was actually kind of impressive for Brad as well.
He did some endpoint management stuff along the way too, because that started where I was meeting with him. And one of my early stories with him is he ran through all this stuff. And I just looked at him and I said, Brad, I have no idea what you just said. and he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we're talking through this stuff. And like, you guys gave me the PR pitch. But now I'm not a practitioner, but I understand the environment. And everything you just said didn't make any sense to me. And he's like, that's good feedback. And then we walked through it again and talked through it. And he really helped, dive into what they were discussing. But that's just Brad, though.
Brad, Sam's Brad. Never go say I'm not a practitioner. You'll lose your cred immediately. Come on.
Yeah, I do. I shouldn't say I'm not a practitioner, because I run the infrastructure here for BWW. I'm the IT admin for the site. So that's where I get my Office 365 knowledge, my Microsoft 365 knowledge, our guest access, our SharePoint, and all that stuff. But I don't deal with endpoint management, because we're an all cloud company. So.
Right. So. Well, you just closed my help desk ticket from my team's guest access this week, so I appreciate that. So,
other things that came out that I find interesting is Microsoft's continuing expansion of Azure Arc. Now, if you went back many, many years, if you wanted to run Azure services locally, you had to go to one of the big vendors and buy a big hunk of hardware, and then put that big hunk of hardware into your data center, and then you were off in the running, which, you're looking at least $100,000 plus investment, probably somewhere in that neighborhood to get that. And Azure Arc really kind of brings down that wall. But the big thing they're announcing here is that it's generally available now for Windows and Linux servers. So for people who are using Azure in a hybrid environment, this is going to be pretty big news.
So this is one of those complete division. Think about Azure as a first step. Azure Arc is the bigger step, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big deal. You're right about that consumption. It's not cheap, but if you're a large enterprise, and if you're looking at, on the other side, AWS Outpost, for example, or things like Azure Arc and these types of deployments, it's an expensive proposition to then get yourself into the way of consuming in the cloud model. I've said for a long time, completely stealing from it's a Alexander it's a really Dutch name. I don't know, but he lives in Australia. But anyways, Alexander had always said the cloud is a model, not necessarily a location. And so if you want to run that model on premises and have kit and blinky lights that if you needed to, you could kill the power on, that is going to require an investment, right? So I think it's actually very interesting that you can take the cloud model to a new location. So those are big boy numbers. I know it. They are. It might at first glance seem ridiculously expensive, but go price out a new data center with enterprise storage, servers, and software stacks, and you'll find the upfront cost there will be a very different experience for sure.
Two other things that were announced, they're sort of along this same line, only because we started to touch on hardware, is there's two new Azure Stack Edge devices. One that fits into a backpack, which I asked Microsoft for a review unit, and they said no. And then there's also an Azure Stack Edge Pro R, which is designed for remote areas, and it basically includes some NVIDIA-style hardware inside. But the whole goal here is that, this conversation is you can now bring Azure into your data center with Azure Arc, and now there's more devices. They already had some of these things, but more, going to literally put Azure in a backpack and go backpacking if you really want to, although you still need a tent.
And maybe some power.
Maybe some power.
So the thing about this is one of those last mile use cases. I think that's important. If you think about, I'm as an organization going to say, yes, I'm going all in for Azure. And then this is actually something that's happened a long time over the years, many times. What is the definition of a data center? And I go back to some time that I supported a retail operation, and retail, right? Well, what is a data center, right? In some organizations, it can just be the powerful PC in this retail outlet or this edge, right? You can have a PC doing more than just being a PC. And actually, I gravitated to the test of it's a PC if only one person uses it at a time. If it's doing something else where other people consume something from it, it's a non-PC. I'm not going to call it a server. I'm not going to call it a data center. But I've seen a lot of environments where they do that type of stuff. And, sometimes they'd make the, more hardware, memory, RAM, and then you do things like maybe potentially a more powerful OS, but like SQL Express can go on like Windows platforms and stuff. So when you start seeing those types of use cases, that becomes a barrier to say, yeah, we're all in on the cloud. We're all in on Azure. So if you talk about some of these edge use cases, and edge can be the fancy name for robo, for retail outlet, for the home office. Nowadays, it could be an interesting angle too, right? So what you want to have is the lion's share of use cases addressed, and public Azure does that. But then there are these unique situations, these corner cases that are prohibiting organizations from fully migrating or otherwise consuming Azure. This is an example of something that is going to address that. Likewise, probably the most uneventful, I won't say uneventful, but something that probably didn't make everybody like go crazy at Ignite was actually done before, when the NFS files were put into preview from Azure Storage, for example. You might think, NFS? I can't even spell NFS. Why would I care about that in 2020? Yeah. Well, the reality is maybe there's an enterprise app on-prem that, I can't move to Azure because I need that. And I don't want to change the app. We've got individuals with like the tinted glasses and the gray hair and the beard and the flannel shirt and the jeans. I can see these people who have built this application on these platforms that have an NFS share, maybe some Linux apps, all that kind of stuff. But maybe because of that, we weren't able to move it to Azure. Well, now you can, right? So think of all these other use cases for that last mile, right? That broadens that conversation. And I don't want to say checks all the boxes, but it effectively checks all the boxes and lets these advanced use cases, these more complete edge cases, bring Azure to the edge, right? That's exactly what it's meant to do. And, consuming these services in different ways is very easy to do with these other packagings, lack of a better word. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's they wouldn't develop this stuff if, one, their customers more than likely weren't asking for it, or they didn't see a very clear use case for it. And I think you hit pretty hard on the head there. Those use cases and how these things can be deployed out into the quite literally the real world.
Right.
So,
Indeed.
what?
Indeed.
Sorry. Oh, I thought you were going to say something else. Anyways, one of the other highlights that I want to point out, only because when I log into the admin portal of Office 365, Microsoft 365, whatever, they've got admin portals all the way down. Like, you could probably open up a page of 75 different Microsoft admin portals. And, they're kind of meshing a couple more when they announced that the Windows Admin Center. So what was this here? Oh, geez, I lost my place on the page. I'm going to have to edit that one out. They said,
we never edit. Come on.
I know. We're not editing. I had it highlighted here.
Verified organic podcast. Come on.
Oh, it's right in the first sentence. That's why I missed it. It says the Windows Admin Center, IT's favorite server management tool, is now available in the Azure portal. What I was going with this is so I log into Office and I see just the massive dashboard of stuff. Now, candidly, I don't deal much on the Azure side. That's why we talk to people like Rick. Rick, is the Azure portal nice, neat, and tidy, or is it more like the Office 365 where you just got admin centers for days?
Well, that's interesting because I do use both.
Yeah.
In my role here, we have a O365 organization that's not Veeam. It's we've made up a fictitious domain, and we use it for really for our backup product of Office 365.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I have some access. So I've used both. And anyways, I need to expense the bill. Thanks for the reminder. But and I look at the Azure portal and I look at the O365 portal, and then I look at on-prem portals and management platforms as well. I have gravitated and accepted the world of multi-portal syndrome. And I have. I think that the single pane of glass is a fantasy. Pane, P-A-I-N, single pane of glass. With that being said, I like the idea of maybe limited aggregated functionality, but the depth and the details, I think you're going to just always have to go to the source, to the portal of record, lack of a better word. Now, the one thing I'll say about the Azure portal, which is where I do spend most of my Microsoft cloud-based administrative time, is that it's very consistent across services, which is huge, because I can be a storage person, or I can be a compute person, or I can be a networking person, or some of those other different services, and they look, feel the same. In fact, I was watching some of the keynote sessions when they were doing demos, and it was other services, the cognitive services, for example, which is way out of my league. But I understood where and how they're consuming Azure, so I could focus on that service in particular. That's actually, I think, a really big deal, because you're going to see people, IT pros, whatever the cloud term is for that, have to learn multiple services. I think it's very important that if you go to Azure as a skill set, you commit to learning. I'm going to be brave here and say 10 services. You can't just be an Azure VM guru. You can't just be a blob storage guru. You need networking. I think everybody should spend some time, and no matter what, you should always put Azure Advisor as something you're familiar with, because it's going to look at security, best practices, cost optimizations, those types of things, right? So definitely Azure Advisor. And then what brings you to Azure? Is it storage? Is it VMs, is it whatever? Then like the security, the networking, and the associated underneath storage services, right? Those are all good things to correlate. And then as well as general administration, things like resource groups and all that. Now I'm saying all this having never taken an Azure class. They may exist and tell you that type of stuff, but some like AZ400, for example, those types of things I think are ways that you should go about it, because people go to a cloud service for one thing, but it's kind of all related to other things, and subscription management is another thing. But I don't think portals are administrative portals, ways of consuming that is a huge deal, because concurrently I think there's also a big press for things like Azure Shell, PowerShell for other platforms, right? So almost to do a lot of things that way. And then you couple that with, where people need to spend their time, and it usually sits in the areas that they have the most responsibility. And the individual of all trades type of phenomena where, 1 minute I'm break fixing in 365, the next minute I'm break fixing in Azure, the next minute I'm break fixing in on-prem. That is still going to happen. But I think, again, the depth of the native platforms will always supersede. So maybe like this at a glance view, but I actually think the individual of all trades doesn't use that as much.
Yeah.
So I'm not super wild about that news, and that was like way too long of an explanation.
No, but see, the reason why I like that is that you didn't just say, "Nah, I didn't like it," and then we moved on. Like
it's amazing. I could just do that.
You genuinely backed up your position. You gave your reasoning, and I think it's justified. As you were talking more and more, to me, what it sounds like, a single pane of glass becomes less desirable the higher up or the more services you have to monitor, right? If your whole world is Teams, yes, a single pane of glass works. But if you're doing Teams, you're doing SharePoint, you're doing OneDrive, you're doing new user onboarding, it starts to not work so well. And especially then once you say, okay, well, that's all in Office, and then you have Azure over here, like I follow you, and like I can't really, I would love to shoot you down, but I really can't.
And you also, one kind of inevitable diversion, if that's a phrase.
Well, we're making up. What was the giganormous earlier?
Giganormous, right? Yeah. One inevitable diversion also is the application conversation, and that rhymes. We do those on Fridays, but the application conversation also will inherently divert you to other platforms. And I'll even keep it within Microsoft SQL stuff. If you need to do database stuff, you have to go to another platform. You have to go to other platforms kind of inherently. So just saying.
Yeah. Just saying.
I don't know where that came. That was like 10 years ago, a phrase.
Preach it, Rick. Preach it. If I could put a little halo over you and like some shining light.
I'm a little giddy today. I don't know. Maybe it's post-Ignite giddiness, right? We are actually at the recording time. Right about 24 hours ago is when the stream concluded. And I tell you, I watched the whole thing. I have, we got the giant TV right here, the social media TV. That's where I had the, well, great. Now I broke everything.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's where I had the social media stream running. It runs on the surface on the TV vertically because usually it's meant for social feeds. It was great feed, and I'm right off of it, but I think I'm a little giddy, or maybe I had too much of that coffee. I don't quite know.
There's a little bit of B. The thing is they announce the challenge, candidly, with Ignite is they announce so many things in such a condensed period, but then you've got to go through the weeds, especially on the Office 365 side. It's like, okay, they announced it, but it's not available. Now, a lot of the stuff on the Azure side, it seemed like more was available, but like I think everything they announced for Teams is, a deliverable by the end of the year. So you got to be excited because, like, for example, webinar functionality coming to Teams. Like we use webinars. I know Veeam does as well. I'm going to be very curious to see how that shakes out. But again, that's coming sometime between now and whenever it arrives, effectively.
I'm going into that I'm going to force myself to take a independent opinion on that. I don't know what to think of that news.
Well, so I have a lot of questions because much like probably how Veeam does it, like that needs to be connected to our website effectively. And then I know we can probably wire it all up with all the different services Microsoft has, but not GoToWebinar is stupidly simple when it comes to this stuff for us. So now the question is, can we replicate that inside of Teams with the functionality? And more importantly, give a little feedback to the Teams team. Is how robust is it? Because they have a history of launching things and they look really good until you need like all the features. For example, because I keep running into this, the calendar inside of Teams. You can't add a third-party calendar to that calendar inside of Teams, which drives me nuts. I really want to make the calendar inside of the Teams app my only calendar, but I can't. You can't.
And I sit on like 6 different teams. Yeah. And you sit on multiple, I'm sure. And in fact, I'll show you. I even bought a device, a Lenovo ThinkSmart. It's
the Teams display.
Device. Yeah, I actually really like this guy. It's $300 something bucks. For some reason the time's not working, but it otherwise works. I really like. Well, I think my Wi-Fi here doesn't permit time queries.
Okay, gotcha.
That's a Veeam fault. But I'm into Teams. It's like I find myself all day in this app, and we record via this app.
Yep.
But I really dissect the webinar bit as going after a new market. Sure, I get it. But I also see that there's a lot of virtual event platform operations using Zoom.
Yes.
And the thought is that's your presenter experience, so it's nice and comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's recapsulated and rebroadcasted. It's easier to record that way. So I kind of think they're going that way. But the one thing about Teams I struggle with as a webinar platform or yet another consumption and delivery mechanism is it's too easy for the attendee to get lost, distracted. Everything else is happening. If you're like me, you're always getting chats. I'm about ready to write a blog post on this. I actually work very specifically to really implement focus in what I do. So believe it or not, I actually turn off my phone at my desk.
Nice.
When I say turn it off, I turn off data. So all of my texting is through Google Voice. That doesn't happen. I will go to it on the browser. So if somebody calls me, it'll ring. In fact, I didn't even mute my phone because nobody calls me. Yeah. So we do that when we record, right? But like, I really work to focus. I'll close Teams, I'll close email, and I'll get stuff done. GSD. In fact, I moved my camera, but my team's little slogan is GSD, get stuff done. And I think that if we just kind of put everything consuming into a consolidation of platforms, which would be everything from, because I would take a webinar as what I would call focused learning effort. I want to pay attention if I'm attending it. Yep. And then if that's also a place where my team is doing random chat, then is that going to
are you going to get pulled out? Yep, that's a very fair point, and something honestly I was thinking more of like the technical aspect, but
it'll work fine. But I just worry about being able to live in the moment and do it. Do you want to hear something funny?
I do.
So I've been using GoToWebinar for well over 10 years, even before I started at Veeam. You're right, it is dead simple. But if you or anyone listening to this podcast have ever done a presentation with GoToWebinar, if you hit that start broadcast button, tell me how this goes. The broadcast is now starting. God. All attendees are in listen-only mode. I have ingrained that phrase in my head. And I've been told. One time I almost matched the lady robot's voice, which is kind of creepy, but because I brought it up a little bit. But I like GoToWebinar. It's effective. The one thing is, if you look at all the different platforms, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Chime, I did that one recently. That's the Amazon one. They have all had significant innovation in the last 6 months. Lots of updates, changes, responding to current conditions, et cetera. But I don't know at all if GT Dubs has made any changes.
I don't know if they have or not, to be honest.
Its delivery model, its consumption and product, at lack of a better word, is really laser focused on webinars. Now they do have a GoToMeeting. They have that more kind of that other side, but GoToWebinar can be spec'd out to 100, 500, 1,000 plus whatever attendees. And we have been using that for years. And, I would try a Teams bit. In fact, later today we're doing a LinkedIn Live. We're using Rendezvous for that as a kind of a capture situation. But I think it is important to have different consumption mechanisms, different delivery mechanisms. But I just want to go through the Teams as a webinar platform before I kind of come to an opinion, because, or at least maybe there's a setting called focus mode. Even something like that would make a huge diff for me, because I just worry about people's attention span, including my own. I'll be completely candid.
It's legitimate.
But the one thing I do like about Teams now, I think, I got the Veeam one, I got the one with you, 2 different ones with Microsoft, but they're actually 3 Ignite and 2 different Ignite ones in the MVP community, and then an event group, and then VMware for VMworld. So there's 5 on my dropdown. And inside of that, there's 3. I mean, there's a lot in the Veeam world, obviously, for me. But one thing I do like is that when you jump to these different organizations or guest roles, you kind of focus on that matter, right? It's not like I'm going to get the Microsoft chat, VMware chat. The only thing I have to do is get it so they all stop emailing me, because those settings, I don't have Teams email me. But I make it a point every day to go look through them and get caught up. It's almost getting to be where my frustration with Slack. I've hit at Teams, but I've hit it at a much higher level of people, of communities, right?
Sure.
So Teams scales better than Slack, if that makes any
No, I
sense.
think that's completely logical. I mean, I've heard time and time and time again from our readers that even G Suite, much like Slack, it's great. Just you can go there, you give them $5, and you can just get up and running, and there's not a whole lot of tweaking. But as your org spans and you need that finer grained control, that's where the experience starts to shift into Microsoft's favor.
Yeah, and the other side of it is, the technology is one thing, and then it's on the users. How do they use these tools?
Sure.
There are some people that will be chatty, annoying, and make it so that it's harder to scale and harder to focus and such. And one thing I will say I enjoy about Teams is my amount of email has gone down. In fact, when we started this call, Brett, I had 5 things in my inbox. On a good day, I'll leave an inbox 0, and that's
I'm an inbox 0 user as well.
I learned a new word, by the way, to describe me.
Giganormous?
No. Somebody on a call yesterday called me a keener.
A keener?
A keener. I had to go Google it.
What is
and
it?
as I was Googling or binging it, I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's just a very eager kind of on the ball, read the instructions.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So it's a good thing. But yes, I am a keener. I like my inbox 0. It's a very kind of just relaxing and stress-free situation. But I still GSD, get a lot of stuff done.
Well, you have to. I'm the same way. I try to end the day to the best of my ability. 0. That is the goal.
I love to pick up like something that needs to be done. If it's in the form of an email, I will pick that email up and put it in the calendar and allocate the time to do it that way. Right? Little things like that.
I definitely believe in the rule of if it takes less than 5 minutes to do it, you do it right when it happens, which can be a distraction. But usually, I don't even have email notifications on anything. So I will open my inbox and, triage just like any other person will do. But if I open your email and it needs something, it's less than 5, I just do it right then. And that way it's just out of my way and done. Doesn't work all the time. But yeah, like if people need me, much like yourself, they know to hit me on Teams. That like intercompany. That's the way to get a hold of me. Don't email me.
Yeah, it's my highest priority is text message. Then email I treat the most importantly, but I don't put notifications on my phone either. And then like a mention in Teams or a direct in Teams would actually for me be a third priority. But it's interesting. I don't actually put email notifications on my phone, but I do put Teams notifications on my phone.
So no, I'm the same way. I have Teams notifications on there, but like email is the one downside is client work, right? I don't get those messages through Teams, but at the same time, I try not to, for the best of my ability, reply to client emails on my phone. I like to try to sit down. That way it's just a more proper, it just feels more formal. I don't know.
I actually put a little twist in my email signature on my phone, see if anybody noticed it. I just said sent from a 5G device or something. Or 6G. No, I put 6G.
6G.
6G. Yeah, I got the new 6G device. It's actually a 4G, but that's okay.
Rounding up something like that. They're all G's at the end of the day.
That's right.
It's speaking of G's, Rick and I actually got to hang out recently. Was that 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago today.
3 weeks ago.
Actually. It was right before the Labor Day holiday. Yeah, it's kind of, I had an opportunity. I was in the area. Brad and I only live 2 hours away, just on that highway right there. And I'm right by the 71 highway.
Oh, gotcha.
But I was in the area. I was meeting another individual and did a live stream on that day. And I said, the weather's going to be absolutely amazing. We had this opportunity at an outdoor place to have a distanced beer situation. And yeah, we got together and honestly, it felt great to do that. Haven't done anything like that in a while. And it's kind of weird, Ohio is not Silicon Valley, Austin, Seattle,
right.
Boston. But, there's another individual that I introduced Brad to that, is in the area, kind of a different enterprise storage area focus.
Yeah,
but,
we could give him a shout out with storagereview.com, right?
Storagereview.com.
Yeah.
Brian Beeler, yeah. And, I've known Brian actually a very long time. Him and I, believe it or not, went to kindergarten together. That's a whole nother story. But, Brian's, he's got a great shop there at Storage Review. So, no, that was fun. And, it's fall's coming up. I'm not really looking forward to that. But
Yeah.
we got a couple more days of nice weather for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping the rest of the week rounds out nicely, and hopefully everybody listening to this is enjoying their time. Hopefully you have decent weather. You can hit that subscribe button. You can find Rick's information down in the post below. Rick, thanks for hanging out with us on this Friday, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.